At the finish, Derek Johnson was a comfortable winner ahead of Paul Breckel, who had 6 minutes to spare over third place Yuri Duplessis. Fourth place went to Billy Coetzee and the first Suzuki home. There was early drama in the production vehicle category when Gavin Nimmo and Richard Leek rolled the Castrol Toyota Hilux in the time trial. An interesting situation had developed at the top of the production vehicle championship, with the reigning champions Cliff Barker and Mike Redden locked together with R.P. Reinecker and his wife Thelma in the Bankford Toyota Land Cruiser. For championship leaders Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the Videosport SVM Land Rover, a good result was imperative.
I think obviously the competition between us and RP at this stage. It is tight, and it was very tight last year, and I think Gussie obviously a slight disadvantage because he didn't run it last year. But one needs to take it easy on a time trial. You know, it's only your starting position for tomorrow.
As was the case in the special vehicle class, a local crew led the production vehicles into the fray. Peter Marisburg pair Neil Woolrich and Paul Vermaak were looking for a maiden national championship win in the beautifully turned out Nissan Sani, which now has factory backing. Behind them, Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the Videosport SVM Land Rover were looking to protect a 100% finish record this season and come away with a rich haul of points. Barker and Redden won the Sugarbelt 400 last year and were keen to see history repeat itself. At the same time, the pair were conscious of the fact that, win or lose, they had to finish ahead of R.P. Reinecker in the Bankford Toyota Land Cruiser. Reinecker was partnered in Natal by Robin Houghton, with conditions not easy in the early stages of the race. Despite the tricky conditions in the early part of the day, Neil Woolrich and Paul Vermaak set a cracking pace in the Nissan Sani. They were intent on quickly stamping their authority on the race and were pushing as hard as they could in the early part of the race. Consistency has been a key factor in the success of Cliff Barker and Mike Redden have enjoyed over the last season or two, and the Videosport SVM Land Rover pair quickly settled into a rhythm. The Land Rover has proved both quick and reliable, but there was plenty of pressure where Barker and Redden were concerned. A tremendous rivalry has sprung up between the pair and R.P. Reinecker, who is doggedly stalking the reigning production vehicle champions. Off-road racing calls for a great deal of teamwork between driver and navigator, and with so much at stake, young Robin Houghton found himself in an awkward situation in his first outing alongside the experienced Reinecker. The day started off promisingly for the second Videosport SVM entry, the Range Rover in the hands of Arthur Abraham and Stratford Voogd. The pair were going along steadily before a broken rear suspension put them out of action. The men with a mission in the field were Springboks Gavin Nimmo and Richard Leek in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. The pair lost a great deal of time through their time trial roll and were busy bombing their way through the field. The Toyota suffered only superficial body damage when it rolled, and circumstances dictated that the pair go flat out throughout the event. Coetzee earned his Springbok colours as a rally driver, and his rallying experience stood him in good stead as the pair pushed the Toyota to the limit. While Coetzee and Leek were siding their way through the field, Ralph and Ray Henderson had taken early control of Class F and the Ford. The Ford sounded strong, with the Hendersons holding off Niels Lemmer and Frans Skutter, who were at the front of Class F and the two-wheel drive Toyota Hilux. At the front of the field, Neil Woolrich and Paul Vermaak were looking comfortable in the Nissan Sani. The pair were controlling the pace of the race from the front and had a comfortable cushion over Cliff Barker and Mike Redden. The Videosport SVM crew were pushing as hard as they could, but were not cutting into the Sani's lead. Behind the leaders, R.P. Reinecker and Robin Houghton were holding down third place in the Bankford Toyota Land Cruiser. The pair were going along steadily enough, but were not making any impression on the crews ahead of them. It was hard work for the drivers and a bumpy ride for the navigators, but Ralph and Ray Henderson looked completely at ease in the front of Class F, with the Ford not missing a beat. Behind them, Gavin Nimmo and Richard Leek had made up huge amounts of time in the Castrol Toyota Hilux and were starting to threaten the likes of Reinecker and Houghton. The Nissan Sani was starting to show a few battle scars, but Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak had consolidated their lead at the front of the field. Woolridge is a former motorcyclist who is looking to join a select band who have won national championship events on 2 and 4 wheels. Fast open sections like this were few and far between on the Sugarbelt, with crews relishing the opportunity to really get mobile. Cliff Barker and Mike Redden were still mobile in the Videosport SVM Land Rover, but they were losing ground to the Sani. Also losing ground were Api Reinicker and Robin Houghton in the Bangford Toyota Land Cruiser. The tighter sections of the course provided the longer wheelbase vehicles with a few problems, but Reinicker and Houghton had other things to worry about. Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek in the Castrol Toyota were still charging through the field, and on corrected time were now a major threat to the Land Cruiser. Driving through the cane fields is like travelling through a tunnel, but Coetzee has seen it all in his day and was still pushing the Toyota to the limit in what had turned into a tremendous performance. There was also an impressive performance from Ralph and Ray Henderson in the Ford. They were in total control of Class F and did not look to have a care in the world. The Flying Hendersons were more than half an hour ahead of the stuntman Popo Skiepers and Ivan Bartholomew in the Chev Ford. The pair had moved up into 6th place overall ahead of Shumi van Vuren and Fani Kotze, who were leading Class E. Water under a bridge called for extreme caution from all the crews, with the Nissan Sani now firmly entrenched in the lead. Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak now had a tight grip on the event and, barring accidents, looked home and dry. Still in second place were Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the Videosport SVM Land Rover, who had dropped back slightly because of a clutch problem. The important factor from their point of view was that they were ahead of Api Reinicker and Robin Houghton in the Bangford Toyota Land Cruiser. The first 3 on the road were firmly entrenched, with Api Reinicker and Robin Houghton next up in the Bangford Toyota Land Cruiser. A late fuel line problem was to hold up the Toyota pair, allowing Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek to slip into 3rd place on corrected time. At the finish, there was no stopping Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermaak, who finally grabbed that first elusive national championship win.
It's great to win a national after so many years of trying and all the long road we've been down with the Sani, but it's turned out to be really great. The Sani's really performing well. We've got it right, we've done all our work, and it's going well.
A slice of history then, with a maiden win for the Nissan Sani. Second place was enough for Cliff Barker and Mike Redden to consolidate their position at the top of the championship table. A great performance too from Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek in 3rd place. You can always rely on the motorcycle brigade to provide for spectacular racing, with some of them starting the race as though there was going to be no tomorrow. The opening events of the season, the Rustenburg 400 and the Barbaspan 500, produced 2 different winners. And right from the start, Daryl Curtis on the Pro Action AGA Panasonic KTM and Errol Dalton on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda fought out an enthralling battle. Also involved in the early stages were Richard Manning on the dealer team Yamaha and Graham McLaughlin on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda. The top riders in South African off-road racing are world-class performers. The championship has been dominated in recent years by Alfie Cox, who is currently campaigning overseas. But in his absence, there is certainly no shortage of top competition. Curtis was setting a cracking early pace, but Manning and Dalton were staying with him all the way. There is a fierce but friendly rivalry among the riders, who make flat-out racing look all too easy. Some terrific battles quickly developed throughout the field, and it was a case of survival of the fittest. Also flying in the early stages of the race was Gavin Nimmo on the privately entered Kawasaki. Nimmo was being chased by 500cc class championship leader Riaan van Niekerk on the PD Motorcycles Honda, with a battle between the two being repeated throughout the field. Out in front, Daryl Curtis was going like the clappers. Curtis had never won a national event and was determined to get it right this time. He was being shadowed by Errol Dalton, who was riding with a broken shoulder blade that had not yet properly healed. Keeping Curtis and Dalton in his sights was Richard Manning, who had taken an early grip on the 200 class.
Richard Manning.
Graham McLaughlin had moved into the 250 class this season and was still up with the front runners. The Bloemfontein rider was still ahead of Gavin Nimmo, who was still on a charge. Also still on a charge was Curtis, who was in a terrific hurry when he arrived at a refuel area. Every second counts in an off-road race, and Curtis was anxious to get going again before the opposition arrived on the scene. While Curtis frantically searched for his fuel can, local youngsters were taking a much calmer outlook on life. It was hardly the sort of fuel stop you see in Grand Prix racing, but with the Pro Action AGA Panasonic KTM topped up with fuel, Curtis was back into the race with no other rider yet into the refuel area. Next into the service area was Errol Dalton on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda. The shoulder injury did not appear to be bothering Dalton too much, and his fuel stop was a little more organised than the Curtis effort. That aside, there was an enthralling twist to their battle. Taking into account time trial results, Curtis had to reach the finish more than 30 seconds ahead of Dalton to be sure of victory. Curtis was doing all he could to put time and distance between himself and Dalton, but the Barberspan 500 winner was also not letting the grass grow under his feet. Dalton knew he had to keep within 30 seconds of Curtis, but his injured shoulder was a worrying factor. Behind Curtis and Dalton, 200 class leader Richard Manning was third on the road. Manning had a tight grip on his class, but was being caught by Gavin Nimmo, who was in impressive form on the privately entered Kawasaki. Also working his way through the field was Brian Bontekoning on the Antilex Derry Shimwell's Yamaha. Bontekoning had caught and passed teammate Alex Bowles on the Antilex Kawasaki, who was second in the 200 class. Bowles was going well, but had dropped a long way behind class leader Richard Manning. Lance Trethaway on the KTM and Rian Finikak were locked in a great battle in the 500 category, but neither had a hope of catching Dalton, who was leading the class. Clayton Enslin on the PD Motorcycles Kawasaki had also lost touch with the front-runners in the 200 class. After a promising start to the race, Graham McLaughlin was slowly dropping down the field on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda, with Grant Bloomfield on the AGA Panasonic KTM out of touch with the 500 class leaders. It was all of academic interest because out in front, Daryl Curtis had finally got it right. Much to the delight of his supporters, Curtis stormed home for his first ever national championship win.
After all those seconds, finally did it.
You were very close between you and Errol. Where did you get away from him?
Well, Errol got a puncture on his second lap, put a new wheel in. I got a puncture on my third lap. And when we left after the third lap, we were so close together. And it was just one big race to the end.
A long overdue win for Daryl Curtis ahead of Errol Dalton and Gavin Nimmo. Curtis took the 250 class, Dalton the 500 category, and fourth place Richard Manning won the 200 class. These highlights of the Bell Sugarbelt 400 were proudly brought to you by